Jon comes face to face with Drogon. Sam and Gilly discover an important fact. Cersei tells Jaime she is pregnant, and Gendry returns. Finally. Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to Deep Geek. Please do consider subscribing if you enjoy the video. This is my detailed explanation of Season 7, Episode 5 of Game of Thrones, Eastwatch. If you have any questions or comments about Episode 5, then please leave them in the comments section below. I'll pick up on these in a Q&A video later in the week. There is a lot of plot development in this episode and huge amounts to talk about, so let's get straight to it. Let's start with Sam and Gilly in Old Town. Gilly stumbles across what sounds like an important fact in one of the books Sam has been bringing back to their room. Assuming she was just mispronouncing his name when she read it out, we learn that Rhaegar got his marriage to Elia Martell annulled and got remarried to someone else. Now, this is important because it means that the child of that union, Jon Snow, is legitimate and therefore ahead of Dany in the Targaryen line of succession. So her claim to be born to rule the Seven Kingdoms is just wrong. She has no claim whatsoever, other than the fact that she has dragons. I suspect we will get a little bit more on this in the next couple of episodes, but the main impact will be felt when everyone finds out. Will Dany withdraw her claim in favour of Jon? Will Tyrion and Varys transfer their loyalty to the Targaryen who doesn't threaten to burn down cities? How will the Lords of the North react to discovering that the King of the North isn't Ned Stark's son after all? This has huge ramifications for Season 8. The reason Sam missed all this is because he was venting his frustration about life in the Citadel, rather than listening to Gilly. But surely we can expect him, or her, to remember it again at a plot-important point. The most important point here, though, is that Sam's frustration finally boils over into decisive action. The Maesters hear about the army of the dead and discuss it in their council of old white men, who promptly decide to do a bit more research before possibly someday discussing it again. And it seems that this is enough for Sam. He's heading north with Gilly and baby Sam and as many relevant books and scrolls as he can find. And presumably, this time, it won't take him an entire season to get across the continent. Up in Winterfell, Sansa seems to have kept up Jon's approach of having regular meetings of all the lords, and Jon Royce and Robert Glover both stand to say that they dislike Jon going south, and openly suggest that they should have chosen Sansa instead. So she has clearly impressed them with her strong leadership over the last couple of episodes. But after hearing them out, Sansa gives them a firm no. Now, this doesn't seem to be enough for Arya, who doesn't believe she really meant it, and obviously thinks that she should have done more to defend Jon and shut down the dissenters. Arya does have a bit of a point here, given that Jon is now their king. What the Northern Lords did was bordering on treason. Also, given that they swore their lives to him so recently, it makes them look incredibly fickle. Anyway, Arya's suspicions about Sansa grow when she finds that Sansa has taken their parents' room at the castle. Jon had obviously suggested that Sansa do this, but that doesn't seem to calm her down. They are now defaulting back into how they were as children, bickering and fighting. Now all this misunderstanding seems to boil down to something very simple. The Stark siblings don't appear to be talking about what's really going on. Granted that Bran isn't particularly communicative these days, and Arya and Sansa never really got on, it would still do them a lot of good to sit down and discuss what they were going to do, and how best to go about it as a team. Incidentally, the voiceover for the pre-season trailer had Sansa reciting something that their father, Ned, said back in Book 1. When the snows fall and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. Ned said this to Arya when telling her that it was one thing to argue with Sansa in the summer, but when winter came, they would need to band together as a pack to survive. And this is, I think, a clue that they will emerge stronger from all this. It may not look good at the moment, although there is a chance that this tension is just a ruse by the Stark siblings to draw out Littlefinger. But by the end of the season, the Stark wolf pack will be strong. Of course, into all this, Littlefinger is starting to get back to his scheming best, leading Arya on a chase through Winterfell as she tries to figure out what he is up to. Note how he says loudly to Maester Wolkan that Lady Sansa thanks him, and very obviously talks to Jon Royce and Robert Glover in Winterfell's main courtyard where all can see. He is trying to imply that Sansa is working with him and the Northern Lords to oust Jon from power. The note Arya finds at the end of it is the one Sansa wrote to Robb back in Season 1, begging him not to go to war, and to bend the knee to Joffrey. Sansa was being manipulated by Cersei at the time, but taken out of context, it certainly seems to suggest that she was betraying the Starks. So Littlefinger's plan here seems to be to turn Arya against Sansa. He saw them both as children, so knows that they did not get on, and he can't help but notice both her martial abilities since she returned home, and her enthusiasm in killing anyone who she thinks betrayed her family since. Elsewhere in Winterfell, Bran is starting to do useful things with his new powers, undertaking a reconnaissance mission north of the Wall with ravens to find out where the Night King's army is. Like the last time Bran tried to spy on him, the Night King spots it immediately, and his very gaze seems to disrupt the magic, or at least make Bran jump back into his own body just to be sure. This is yet more evidence that the Night King is very powerful indeed. He seems to both know what Bran is doing and be able to stop it. And like Bran, we probably haven't seen the extent of his powers yet. The duel between these two will be something to keep an eye out for over the coming episodes, because at the moment they are just testing each other out, really. But this time, Bran does get the information he needs and sends out ravens to at least Dragonstone and the Citadel, telling them where the army of the dead is. Moving now to the repercussions of the battle at the end of last week's episode. It's clearly an overwhelming victory for Daenerys. Jaime and Bran did escape, about which more later, and Tyrion is clearly troubled by all he has seen. By the devastation caused by the dragons, Dany's ruthlessness, all of it. And he talks some of it through with Varys, although they don't seem to reach much of a conclusion other than that Dany clearly can be quite destructive. So it's important that she is surrounded by wise counsel. This is not a new revelation to either of them, surely, but it does keep up the gentle drip of hints that perhaps eventually one or both of them will decide that Dany isn't the queen for them after all. They are still a way off from that, but it's clear that their support for Dany is tempered by ethical concerns and pragmatism. The ethical issues here are surrounding Dany's approach to dealing with her defeated enemies. She doesn't want to take prisoners, so it's a matter of bending the knee or death. Some immediately kneel, but most wait until Drogon starts roaring at them, or until they have seen her execute Randall and Dickon. Then, with the threat made very real, everyone submits. The ethical issues here are not straightforward. Do what I say or die is clearly not a particularly enlightened mode of ruling, but it is undeniably effective and may shorten the war, saving lives. Here Daenerys only kills 2 people, and those deaths seem relatively swift compared to what, say, Cersei would have handed out. But in the long run, ruling by fear, which is what she is instituting here, would make her a tyrant, not the liberating ruler she claims to be. Thankfully, the show didn't spoon-feed us any answers here, and we're left to decide for ourselves whether she was right or wrong. For now, the troubled look on Tyrion's face is probably fair enough. Over on Dragonstone, when Daenerys returns from her victory, we have the long-awaited meeting between Jon and a dragon. Drogon roars at him, but Jon doesn't back down, and they end up with Jon stroking Drogon's snout. Dany plays it cool, but you can tell that she is intrigued. Most people cower in front of dragons, but not Jon. This is probably yet more foreshadowing of Jon being revealed as a Targaryen, But in this moment it is more important as an opportunity for Daenerys and Jon to grow closer. They seem to connect on a more human level in this episode, rather than just as monarchs. And of course, Jorah shows up at just the right time to find her smiling at what must seem to him to be yet another younger, handsome, dark-haired warrior who would make an excellent marriage material for Dany. Poor guy. But the main event on Dragonstone is the hatching of the plan that will dominate the last 2 episodes of this season. Jon and Jorah will go north to get a white as evidence of the army of the dead, and bring it to show the 2 queens. Meanwhile, Tyrion will arrange via Jaime for a ceasefire with Cersei, so that all the rulers of Westeros can get together, and, Jon hopes, agree to finally focus their attention on the army of the dead. This is an innovative but high-risk plan, and I must admit I do question some of the thinking here. For a small group to head straight into where they think the Night King's army is without any backup is a bold move, particularly when the prize they are after, a white to bring south, is probably not going to be as effective as they seem to think it is in gaining people's support. Dany seems almost won over by Jon already, and surely would believe him completely if Jorah goes up there and just reports back on what he sees. She won't need to see an actual white. No, the audience here is Cersei. Dany wants Cersei to realise the danger and agree to an extended ceasefire so they can jointly face that threat before resuming hostilities. But does anyone really think that putting a reanimated corpse in front of Cersei is going to make her back down? After all, she already has a reanimated corpse by her side, and she doesn't see that as a threat. Can Tyrion really not foresee that Cersei will just want to use this new development to her advantage? So this is a bold plan, but it's hard to see the real-world benefits it will bring. However, I'm sure it will make for epic TV. In King's Landing, we have a lot of new plot strands teased out in only a couple of scenes. Jaime and Bran arrive back after surviving Dragonfire and the Blackwater Rush, and off-screen, Bran arranges for Tyrion and Jaime to meet, as per Dany and Jon's master plan. I would have liked to see that communication, because Tyrion and Bran have a lot of history, but perhaps we'll see them have a proper reunion later in the season. Anyway, the reunion between Tyrion and Jaime goes as well as Tyrion could probably have hoped for. They may not be as close as they once were, but despite his bluster, Jaime puts Tyrion's proposal to Cersei just as he asked him to. Cersei, of course, clearly expects Jaime to punish Bronn in some way for being in secret contact with Tyrion, but Jaime seems to have grown rather fond of Bronn, not to mention knowing him his life several times over, so probably won't want to go through with that. So I suspect this means that Bronn's time as part of Team Lannister is drawing to a close. Cersei then tells Jaime that she is pregnant. There is a lot of subtext here. First, there's the question of whether she actually is pregnant. I think she probably is, but we can't be sure. Then there's the fact that he double-checks that he is the father, which implies that he knows that she sleeps with other people, even if he doesn't, and has somehow come to terms with it. Then there's also the way that she slips so easily from a loving hug to a threat not to betray her again, putting into our minds that perhaps he will betray her again. But the most important thing is probably that Cersei being pregnant with his child is undeniably the most effective way to guarantee that Jaime will stay by Cersei's side. Even if his passion for her is disappearing, his love for his unborn child won't wane so easily. The final thing we can take from this scene is Cersei's attitude towards Dany's proposal. As we suspected, she is clearly willing to go along with Dany's plans for the time being, while she decides how best to take advantage of the changed situation. She has no intention whatsoever of doing something for the greater good of humanity. She just wants to destroy her enemies and ensure the continuation of the Lannister dynasty. So even if Jon does return with the White, and gather the lords and ladies of Westeros to witness the fact, he will fail in getting Cersei to support him, or indeed to stop the war for the Iron Throne. She may pretend to go along with it for a while, but Cersei cannot be trusted in this. And of course, down in Flea Bottom we have, finally, the return of Gendry. He seems a lot more combative and willing to embrace his father's heritage than he did before. When Tyrion is discovered by the guards, Davos tries to talk their way out of trouble, but Gendry just hits them in the head with his warhammer, just like his father would have. And when Davos tries to get Gendry to hide his heritage from Jon, Gendry is having none of it. So it will be interesting to see how this plays out. A few years of hiding out in a blacksmith forge have kept him out of people's minds, but now he is back out in the open, he is a definite target. The only remaining son of the king whose descendants Cersei tried to eliminate completely, and who Daenerys would call the usurper. This is not just a fan service addition to the cast, it is a significant plot development. Finally, in Eastwatch, Jon, Davos, Gendry and Jorah arrive to find that Tormund has captured and imprisoned Sandor, Beric and Thoros, who were apparently found heading towards Eastwatch. That is a confrontation I would also have liked to see, and it does make me wonder where the rest of the Brotherhood is, or whether these three really are all that's left of them. Anyway, when they all come face to face, there is the now usual round of old acquaintances catching up, and in this case hostilities being reignited. But once more we see Jon as the great conciliator, bringing people together who should be at each other's throats. Gendry and those who sold him to Melisandre, Jon and the man who killed his sister's best friend, and so on. Their motivations may be different, but they share a goal. And there is another layer here that is even more fundamental, although perhaps a book-only thing. Jon brings them all together by saying they are all on the same side because they are all breathing. In other words, it is still us versus them, because it is the living against the dead. Just a few weeks ago, George R.R. Martin revealed that Beric Dondarrion, and by implication also Jon, is a fire wight. His heart isn't beating and blood isn't flowing through his veins. This isn't a straightforward dichotomy of living versus dead or good versus evil. Now, the show is probably just ignoring this added layer of nuance, but we shouldn't. Jon is already bridging the gap between the living and the dead, and I think this is a hint of an even greater role of conciliation that is ahead of him. But of course, here we are faced with a straightforward mission north of the Wall to capture a wight. And next episode we will see how Jon, Beric, Thoros, Sandor, Gendry, Jorah and Tormund get on. I don't expect all of them to return alive. What do you think? What struck you most about episode 5? And do you have any questions for my Q&A video? Please put them in the comments below. If you'd like to support me in making these videos, the best way to do it is through Patreon, and I've got a great community starting to grow over there. And of course, if you want to know when my next video comes out, then please click on the subscribe button and make sure your notifications are enabled. Thanks for watching. That's all for this time. I'll see you again soon.